All right, everyone. We start off today talking about, link in the description, archived, of course, statements by the Trump administration the other day, talking about basically getting a clear victory at the U.S. border. This is, in my opinion, true. There are certain things that the Trump administration has done that are not working as well as others, but the border, I think, is so far the biggest achievement, that and maybe getting the tax cuts renewed. Um, you've got the expansion of the border wall, although keep in mind it keeps getting hindered by courts and by legal suits in general. Land usage, environmentalism, they'll say, well, you can't put wall here because it's a migratory path for, some endangered lizard or something like that, which is ridiculous. The border wall should simply be completed. I'm sure that the lizards will be fine. But you've got that. You've got other legal attacks. Now they're also retrofitting the wall. For instance, they're going to paint it black to reduce maintenance costs and to make it heat up more so that it's harder to scale. And the idea is that that extra 30 or 40 degrees in the hot baking sun probably makes it a little bit more difficult for somebody to actually physically climb over the border. Might create a little bit of a hindrance, perhaps. But he's largely triumphed. You got to look at the situation for what it is. 100 years ago, it made sense to allow continuous immigration into the United States, or 150 years ago. That's roughly around when the Homestead Act was passed, because we were trying to link the East and West Coast, build infrastructure, and fill in the country because a lot of it was basically empty. That is no longer the case. Much of the arable land in the country has now been gobbled up. It's increasingly being gobbled up, by the way, by corporate farming and stuff like that. That's why you have to live in the pods, at least if you're in Los Angeles, I suppose. And stupid things like that. This dystopian thing that we've got going on right now is the result of these kinds of policies. The Homestead Act made sense. Okay, well, the East Coast settled, the West Coast is settled. There's not a whole lot going on in between, but you've got all of this land that would be really, really great for growing grains and things like that. Why don't we build railroads and shit? But there's nothing going on there. How about we make little railroad towns and then we parcel off the land and people will create settlements of their own and infrastructure will grow and cities will grow and farms and things like that. But that was then. This is now. 150 years on from the Homestead Act, it no longer makes sense to do the give us your huddled masses thing. That was never a principle or ethos anyway to the founders of the United States. Do I believe that people on a meritocratic basis should be able to gain residency and then citizenship in the United States, like some eminent scientist or something like that? Yes, there should be a merit visa, by the way. Do I believe that people should have to learn English in order to immigrate? Yes, they should show at least reasonable proficiency. You don't have to be like fully fluent. That may be a little bit much to ask. You should use like the Dutch system for immigration. But here's my problem with illegal immigrants. And it's no onus on them as individuals. It's just the principle in general. If the first thing that you're doing when you set foot in the country is break the law. When literally the first step you take onto U.S. soil, you are doing something illegal. You are disrespecting the way in which the country has decided to function, and you're violating its laws. That's not necessarily a good look. And try doing that in most countries in the world. In most countries in the world, you're not just going to get detained and then pushed back across the border. In some, you might get shot. In some, you might get put in a gulag for 10 years. In some, you may end up in a camp where they assume that you're a spy or something like that. Try marching into North Korea. Try doing that. I don't mean to make a comparison with, arguably the most stringent country in the world with regards to that. Try walking into China across the border illegally. Try doing it in India. Try doing it in, Eastern Europe. Try doing it in Russia. Most countries in the world have fairly stringent policies with regards to immigration. And some are very lucky. For instance, Australia, if the government were deliberately shipping people in from abroad, well, it's a continent, but it's also an island. So it takes a little bit more difficulty to get there. You cannot walk across the Australian border unless you happen to have a really, really good diving suit and a good oxygen supply. Now you're going to have to row, row, row your boat. So it's a little bit more isolated. Same with the UK. If it weren't for the UK's government deliberately importing outsiders, Britain would be a fortress effectively because, do you really want to have to row across the English Channel only to be intercepted by their Coast Guard? I guess they're actually attempting to do that to some degree, but, it's hit or miss, I suppose. With the United States, we have two massive land borders, with Canada and with Mexico. These borders are not fully fortified yet, but Trump is changing that, especially at the southern border, because that's where more people are coming in on foot. You do have one additional problem, though, and that's that people will come in as tourists and then never leave and simply disappear into ethnic communities of their own ethnicity. This has been happening too. For instance, it's calculated there are about 100,000 people from Poland illegally in the country. Now, nobody really has a problem with the Polish, unless they're crazy because the Polish are pretty based. Their government a little bit less so now, but the people in general. And beet soup is really great, but nobody really has a problem with that. And this is also another problem that needs to be addressed, which is, people coming in and saying, "Hey, I just want to see New York City," and then, you never hear from them again. Another thing that's been tackled with haste is all of the undocumented children that came across and they disappeared. Basically, it's about 30,000 people, or actually, I think it was 36,000 unaccompanied minors that got taken off, and now they can't even make contact with their so-called guardians. And a lot of them are being trafficked. A lot of them are dead already. Some of them probably are fine, but I have a feeling that the majority of them are being abused in some shape or form. Trump's administration has cracked down on that, and the number of unaccompanied minors that are unaccounted for has also dropped considerably by thousands and thousands of people. You've got successful ICE raids going on, despite the fact that people are attempting to impede it at every possible moment because they're insane. And so overall, the border policy is working. And it's like night and day too. Despite a few setbacks and some things that Donald Trump has suggested that won't work or haven't worked, can you really make a comparison between his border policy and immigration policy in the more general sense and that of the, asterisk administration that came before, the Sleepy Joe administration? There's no similarity whatsoever. It's literally like night and day. Overall, therefore, I think at least on this one issue, generally speaking, Donald Trump has scored an unequivocal victory. That's about all. Peace out.